My name is Klaus Müller, and I was 22 years old when I realized I would probably die tonight. April 11th, 1945. The teletype machine clattered like a mechanical heartbeat. I stood in the Führerbunker communications room pulling paper through the roller, my hands already shaking before I read the first word. Outside, Soviet artillery was turning Berlin into burning rubble. Inside, we lived in concrete and denial and the smell of death. The message came through at 9:17 in the evening. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was dead. My throat closed. The paper slipped from my fingers, and I had to grab it before it hit the floor. My first thought was not about history or providence or any of that bullshit. My first thought was, if I deliver this message wrong, if my face shows the wrong expression, if I hesitate for 1 second too long, the SS guard outside Hitler's door will put a bullet in my brain. I had watched it happen 3 days ago. Another communications officer named Werner. He delivered bad news from Army Group Center. His voice cracked when he said the word retreat. Hitler screamed at him for 20 minutes. Werner stood there sweating, trying not to shake, failing. When Hitler finally dismissed him, Werner walked past the SS guards. One of them grabbed his arm. Werner disappeared into the corridor. I heard the gunshot 10 minutes later. They said he killed himself. They said that about everyone who disappeared. I folded the Roosevelt message with fingers that would not stop trembling. The paper crinkled too loud. I smoothed it flat, read it again. My stomach was a block of ice. This message would make Hitler either ecstatic or homicidal, and I would not know which until I was already standing in front of him with no way out. The door to Hitler's office stood 20 meters away. 2 SS guards flanked it, young men with dead eyes and MP-40 submachine guns. They knew me. I delivered messages 6 times per day. But tonight, I walked toward them, and my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. One guard nodded. The door opened. The smell hit me like a fist. Rotting food. Unwashed bodies. Something chemical I could not identify. The air was so thick I could taste it. Hitler sat hunched over architectural plans, his left hand shaking in constant rhythm. He did not look up. Urgent news from the monitoring service, mein Führer. His head rose slowly. His eyes were yellow. Actual yellow, like someone with liver failure, bloodshot and watery and focused on nothing. For 3 seconds, he just stared through me. I stopped breathing. Then he reached for the paper. His hand shot out so fast, I flinched. He snatched it from my grip, and I felt my bladder almost let go. Hitler read the message. Nothing happened. His face was stone. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. I wanted to run, but my feet were welded to the floor. Then his eyes went wide. His mouth opened. He stood up, and his chair crashed backward into the concrete wall, and the sound was a gunshot, and I thought, this is it. This is when he kills me, and I braced for the bullet. He started screaming, not words, animal sounds, high-pitched wailing that echoed off concrete. He grabbed the paper with both shaking hands and waved it over his head like a flag. Spit flew from his mouth. His face went purple. Providence, Providence, the Tsarina Elizabeth, Frederick saved. History repeats. They will make peace. The alliance collapses. I stood frozen against the wall, my back pressed into cold concrete. Hitler was dancing, actually dancing, shuffling his feet, waving the paper, tears streaming down his face. He screamed for Goebbels, screamed for Bormann. Within 90 seconds, the small office was packed with officers and officials. I was crushed against the wall, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. Hitler kept reading the message out loud. His voice cracked and broke. He was crying and laughing at the same time. Goebbels arrived in his long leather coat. Hitler grabbed his arm with both hands, fingers digging in like claws. Goebbels read the message, and his face transformed into something rapturous. He embraced Hitler. They held each other, these 2 men who had orchestrated the deaths of millions, crying and laughing about a dead American president. Goebbels shouted for champagne. Someone ran to get it. Officers crowded into the room. I was trapped in the corner watching this mass delusion spread like a virus. Some generals smiled and nodded. Others stared at nothing with dead eyes. One old general I did not know stood with his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping in his face. The champagne arrived. Bottles popped. The sound made me jump. Hitler made phone calls to field commanders, his voice high and excited, telling them to hold on. The miracle had arrived. Negotiations would begin within days. He said the Western powers would realize their true enemy was Stalin. He said everything was about to change. I looked at that old general. Our eyes met. In his face, I saw something that made my blood freeze. He knew. He knew this was insane. He knew the miracle was a fantasy. And in his eyes, I saw the calculation. Do I pretend to believe, or do I die? He raised his champagne glass and forced a smile. At midnight, I escaped back to my station. My legs barely worked. I sat at the teletype machine and my hands were shaking so badly I could not type. The champagne celebration continued down the hall. Laughter and shouting, and Hitler's cracked voice talking about destiny. The teletype machine started chattering. I pulled the paper through. Army Group Vistula reporting they were being pushed back on all fronts, running out of ammunition, requesting permission to withdraw. Casualty estimates, 40,000 in the last 72 hours. I sat there holding this message. Down the hall, they were celebrating a miracle. In my hands, I held the proof that nothing had changed. The Soviet guns were still firing. The armies were still dying. The miracle was a hallucination. I should deliver this message. That was my job. Walk down that corridor, interrupt the celebration, hand Hitler this piece of paper that would destroy his fantasy. Werner's face flashed in my mind. The way he looked when Hitler screamed at him. The way his hands shook. The sound of the gunshot in the corridor. I folded the message and put it in my pocket. This was a court-martial offense. This was treason. If they discovered I withheld battlefield reports, I would be executed. But if I delivered this message right now, while Hitler was drunk on champagne and delusion, while Goebbels was preaching about providence, while the room was packed with officers high on false hope, I knew exactly what would happen. Hitler would shoot the messenger, maybe literally, maybe with his own sidearm, or maybe he would just scream until the SS guards dragged me out. Either way, I would die. I sat at my desk with the message in my pocket and listened to the celebration. My heart would not slow down. Every footstep in the corridor made me jump. Every sound could be someone coming to arrest me. At 2 a.m, another message arrived, then another, each one worse than the last. More ground lost, more units destroyed, more cities falling. I folded each message and stacked them in my desk drawer under a pile of blank forms. By dawn, I had concealed 12 situation reports. The champagne bottles were finally empty. Hitler had passed out at his desk, his head on the architectural plans, drool on his chin. Goebbels had gone back to his quarters. The officers had dispersed. The bunker fell quiet except for the constant rumble of artillery. I sat at my station staring at the drawer full of hidden messages. 12 pieces of paper that proved the miracle did not exist. 12 pieces of evidence that could get me killed. The door to the communications room opened. My heart stopped. The old general stepped inside, the one with the clenched jaw who did not smile during the celebration. He closed the door behind him. We were alone. He walked to my desk, looked at me, said nothing. I could not breathe. He knew. Somehow he knew I had withheld messages. This was the end. This was how Werner felt in the seconds before they killed him. The general reached into his coat. I braced for the pistol. He pulled out a silver cigarette case, opened it, offered me one. My hand shook so badly I could barely take it. He lit both cigarettes with a gold lighter, took a long drag, let the smoke out slowly. "You are very young," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, used up. I said nothing, could not speak. "Do you believe in miracles, Miller?" The question hung in the air. Outside, an artillery shell exploded close enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The light bulb swung on its cord, throwing shadows. "No, sir. Neither do I." He smoked his cigarette down to the filter. "But we will all pretend we do. Because the alternative is a bullet." He turned to leave, stopped at the door, did not look back. "The messages in your drawer, deliver them at 0800 hours. After he wakes up, after the champagne wears off. He will be calmer then. You might survive." The door closed. I sat there shaking, cigarette burning forgotten between my fingers. The old general had just saved my life, and in doing so, he had shown me the truth that everyone in this bunker already knew but could not say out loud. We were not waiting for a miracle. We were waiting to die, and the only question was whether we would die today or tomorrow, whether we would die for telling the truth or die for maintaining the lie. I opened my desk drawer and looked at the stack of hidden messages. 12 pieces of paper, 12 death sentences if discovered, 12 proofs that yesterday's celebration was mass delusion. At 800 hours, I would deliver them. Hitler would scream. Officers would look at their feet. The champagne hangover would make everything worse. But I would do my job, and maybe I would survive another day. The bunker shook from another impact. Dust fell like snow. I sat at my desk smoking the cigarette the general gave me, and for the first time since entering this concrete tomb 6 months ago, I understood something fundamental. Everyone here was already dead. Some of us just did not know it yet. And the ones who did know were the ones with dead eyes and clenched jaws who raised champagne glasses and pretended to believe in miracles because the only alternative was to die screaming the truth. I stubbed out the cigarette, opened my desk drawer, began preparing the messages for delivery in 4 hours. Outside, the Soviet guns fired without stopping. Inside, a man who had conquered a continent lay passed out drunk at his desk, dreaming of salvation that would never arrive. And I sat there with 12 pieces of paper that proved God was not on our side. God had never been on our side. We had just convinced ourselves he was, all the way down to hell. At 8:03 hours, I walked down the corridor carrying 12 death sentences in a manila folder. My boots echoed on concrete. Each step felt like walking to my own execution. The folder was light, but my hands made it shake like it weighed 50 pounds. I had rehearsed what I would say. The words dissolved in my mouth before I could form them. 2 SS guards stood outside Hitler's office, different men than last night. These were older, harder. One had a scar running from his eye to his jaw. The other had no expression at all on his face. That was somehow worse. I announced myself. My voice cracked. The scarred guard smirked. He knocked twice on the door and opened it without waiting for response. The smell was worse in daylight. Or maybe it was not daylight down here. There were no windows, just electric bulbs that made everything look yellow and sick. Hitler sat at his desk with his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, and I saw his eyes were bloodshot and watery. Champagne hangover. Good. The general was right. Deliver bad news to a hangover, not to drunk enthusiasm. Situation reports from overnight, mein Führer. I placed the folder on his desk. My hand left a sweat print on the manila. Hitler stared at the folder like it was a snake. He did not open it. How many reports? 12, mein Führer. His left hand started its constant tremor. The right hand reached for the folder, stopped, reached again. His fingers touched the edge and recoiled. Read them to me. My throat closed. This was worse than I expected. If I read them aloud, my voice would have to speak every piece of bad news. My tone would matter. My inflection would matter. One wrong emphasis, and he would hear doubt. Doubt meant Werner in the corridor with a bullet in his brain. I opened the folder. The first report was Army Group Vistula. I read it in the flattest voice I could manage. Pushed back on all fronts. Ammunition critical. 40,000 casualties. Hitler's face did not change. He just stared at the desk. Second report. Army Group Center requesting permission to withdraw from prepared positions. Enemy breakthrough imminent. Nothing. No reaction. Third report. Berlin City Commandant reporting civilian panic. Mass evacuation attempts. Soviet forward units now within 8 kilometers of city center. Hitler's right hand closed into a fist. Fourth report. Luftwaffe High Command reporting fuel exhausted. All fighter operations suspended except emergency defense of the capital. The fist opened, closed, opened. His knuckles were white. I read 6 more reports, each one worse than the last. More ground lost, more units destroyed, more cities falling. My voice started to shake on report number 9. I could not help it. The words were too terrible. Entire armies ceasing to exist. Defensive lines collapsing. Commanders requesting permission to surrender. Hitler stood up. The chair did not crash this time. It made a small scraping sound. Quiet. That was so much worse than the crash. He walked to the wall where a large map hung. Red pins showed German positions. Blue pins showed enemy forces. The blue pins covered most of the map now. The red pins clustered in shrinking pockets. He traced a finger along the Elbe River where American forces had stopped. His finger left a smear on the map. I realized his hands were dirty. When had he last washed? "They are waiting," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse. "The Americans. They are waiting for us to bleed out. Then they will make peace. Roosevelt's death changes everything. The new president, this Truman, he is a nobody, a haberdasher. He will see reason. I stood holding the folder with the last 3 unread reports. The bunker shook from an artillery impact. Dust fell. Hitler did not react. The alliance will collapse, he continued, still facing the map. Churchill and Stalin will turn on each other. They always intended to. We just need to hold on. The miracle has arrived. You saw it last night. You were there. His voice was dreamy, disconnected, like he was describing a pleasant memory instead of mass delusion fueled by champagne and desperation. Yes, mein Führer, I was there. They will come to us, the British and Americans. They will beg us to join them against the Bolsheviks. We will negotiate from a position of strength. All we need is time and faith. I looked at the remaining reports in my folder. One detailed Soviet tank armies massing for a final assault on Berlin. Another described civilian casualties from the previous day's artillery bombardment. 3,000 dead. The last reported that the Chancellery building above us was now rubble. We were living in a tomb, under ruins, under a dying city. Shall I continue with the remaining reports, mein Führer? No. He turned from the map. His face was calm. Too calm. I have heard enough. Return to your station. I hesitated. Standard procedure was to have him sign acknowledging receipt of all reports, but asking him to sign 12 pieces of paper documenting catastrophic defeat while he was talking about negotiating from strength seemed like suicide. Mein Führer, the reports require your... I said return to your station. His voice was flat, dead. I had heard that tone before, right before Werner disappeared. I turned to leave. My legs wanted to run, but I forced them to walk normally. Steady pace, not too fast. Fast meant fear, and fear meant weakness, and weakness meant death. Miller, I stopped, did not turn around, could not turn around. If I saw his face, I would know whether I was about to die, and my body would betray me. Yes, mein Führer. You believe the reports you just read. I can hear it in your voice. My heart stopped. This was it. This was the moment. 20 seconds from now, I would be Werner. 20 seconds from now, an SS guard would drag me into a corridor and put a Luger to the back of my head, and my mother would receive a letter saying I died serving the Reich with honor. I read what was transmitted, mein Führer. I do not interpret. I only deliver. Silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. An artillery shell exploded close enough that the light bulb swung. Shadows danced on the walls. Get out. I walked through the door, past the SS guards, down the corridor. My legs were shaking so badly I had to touch the wall for balance. 30 meters to my station, 20 meters, 10. I made it to my desk and sat down, and my whole body started trembling. Not just my hands, everything. My teeth chattered. I clenched my jaw so hard my head hurt. The general's words echoed in my mind. You might survive. Might. Not will. Might. I had just read 12 reports documenting total military collapse to a man who believed in miracles. I had used the wrong inflection. He heard my doubt. He called me out on it. And he let me walk away. Why? The teletype machine started chattering. I pulled the paper through with shaking hands. New message. Army Group Vistula. Commander requesting immediate permission to surrender. Enemy artillery making defensive positions untenable. Casualties now exceeding 50%. Request urgent response. I stared at this message. A German general was begging for permission to surrender. 3 months ago, that general would have been court-martialed for even thinking such words. Now he was putting it in writing and transmitting it to the Führer bunker. The world was ending, and we were all just pretending it was not. I folded the message, put it in a new folder, stood up. My legs still shook, but they worked. I walked back down that corridor, back to that door, back to those SS guards. The scarred one looked at me with something like pity. I knocked, entered. Hitler had returned to his desk. He sat with his head in his hands, staring at nothing. New message, mein Führer, Army Group Vistula. I placed the folder on his desk. He did not look at it, did not acknowledge my presence, just sat there staring at nothing with dead eyes. I stood waiting for him to read it, waiting for him to react, waiting for him to do anything. Nothing happened. 30 seconds passed. A minute. The folder sat unopened. Hitler sat unmoving. The only sound was the distant rumble of artillery and the constant tremor of his left hand drumming against the desk. I realized with creeping horror that he was not going to read it. He was not going to respond. The general commanding 40,000 men was begging for permission to surrender, and Hitler was going to sit here and ignore it. Those 40,000 men would die, not because surrender was impossible, because the Führer would not give permission. Shall I wait for your response, mein Führer? His eyes focused on me. For just a moment, I saw something in them. Not anger, not delusion. Something worse. Awareness. He knew. In that moment, looking at me with those yellow, bloodshot eyes, Adolf Hitler knew everything I knew. Knew the war was lost. Knew the miracle was fantasy. Knew he was sending men to die for nothing. And he was going to do it anyway. Tell them to hold their positions, he said quietly. Tell them relief is coming. Tell them the Americans will join us within days. Tell them to have faith. Yes, mein Führer. I turned to leave. His voice stopped me again. Müller, how old are you? 22, mein Führer. You are very young. He said it exactly like the general had said it, with the same tired, used-up voice. When this is over, when we have won, you will tell your children about these days, about the dark time before the miracle arrived. They will ask you if you believed. What will you tell them? I stood with my back to him, staring at the door, knowing the SS guards were just outside, knowing my answer could kill me. I will tell them I believed, mein Führer. Liar. The word hung in the air like a blade. I stopped breathing. But you are a good liar, he continued. A necessary liar. We need good liars now. We need men who can pretend to believe even when belief is dead. So go. Send your message. Tell them relief is coming. Tell them the miracle is real. Lie well, Müller. Lie like your life depends on it. He paused. I heard him stand, heard him walk closer, felt him behind me, close enough to touch. Because it does. I left that office and walked back to my station on legs that barely functioned. I sat at my teletype machine and typed the response. Relief is coming. American alliance imminent. Hold positions. Have faith. I transmitted this message to a general commanding 40,000 dying men. I told him to wait for salvation that would never arrive. I lied in official military communication and condemned thousands of soldiers to death. And I did it because Adolf Hitler had looked at me with those dead yellow eyes and told me that lying was how I would survive. The general was right. Everyone in this bunker was already dead. Some of us just had better lies to hide behind than others. 3 hours later, the bunker started to smell like gasoline. I noticed it first at 1400 hours when I returned from delivering another batch of reports. The chemical stink cut through the usual rot and sweat and unwashed bodies. Sharp, acrid, wrong. My station sat at the intersection of two corridors. From here, I could see the main passage leading to Hitler's quarters and the side tunnel that connected to the emergency generator room. SS guards stood at both junctions, more guards than usual. They were not looking at me. They were looking at each other. Something was happening. The teletype started chattering. I pulled the paper through, and my hands froze. Soviet forward reconnaissance units had penetrated the Tiergarten. They were now less than 5 kilometers from the Chancellery. Artillery spotters were calling in coordinates for the bunker complex. Direct hits expected within 12 hours. I read this 3 times. The Soviets knew where we were. They were going to bury us alive under rubble and fire. We had 12 hours, maybe less. I should deliver this immediately. Standard procedure. But my legs would not move. I sat there with the paper in my hands and that gasoline smell getting stronger, and I realized with absolute certainty that delivering this message would be the last thing I ever did. Hitler would read it and understand that the end had arrived. And when men like Hitler understood the end had arrived, they did not die alone. Werner's face flashed in my mind. The bullet, the corridor, the explanation that he killed himself. How many more corpses would there be today? The gasoline smell was overwhelming now. I stood up and walked toward the generator room. Not fast, not suspicious. Just a communications officer checking on technical equipment. The SS guards watched me but did not move. The generator room door stood half open. I looked inside and my blood turned to ice water. 5 jerry cans of gasoline lined up against the wall. 3 more sat in the corner. An SS officer I did not recognize was pouring gasoline from a can into the ventilation shaft. The fumes were so strong they made my eyes water. He turned and saw me. His face was young, maybe younger than mine, with cold blue eyes that showed nothing. Get out. I backed away, returned to my desk. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hands were shaking again, worse than before. They were preparing to burn the bunker. Not might burn it. Not planning to burn it someday. Preparing to burn it now. Today. Those jerry cans were positioned at ventilation shafts. When they lit them, the fire would spread through the entire complex in minutes. Everyone inside would burn alive or suffocate from smoke. This was not evacuation. This was mass murder disguised as military procedure. I sat at my desk trying to breathe normally. The undelivered message about Soviet artillery lay on my desk. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Delivering it would accelerate whatever was about to happen. Not delivering it bought time. Maybe hours. Maybe minutes. The telephone on my desk rang. I stared at it for 3 rings before I could move. Picked it up with a hand that would not stay steady. Communications. Miller. This is Brigade Führer Monka. Report to conference room immediately. All communications personnel. The line went dead. My throat closed. All communications personnel meant everyone who had access to messages coming in and out of the bunker. Everyone who knew what was really happening outside these concrete walls. Everyone who could tell the truth. I stood up. My legs felt like they were made of wet concrete. The conference room was 30 meters away. It might as well have been 30 kilometers. I walked. Each step was conscious effort. Left foot, right foot. Breathe. Do not run. Running means panic, and panic means weakness, and weakness means death. 4 other communications officers were already in the conference room when I arrived. I knew all of them. Schneider, who had 3 children. Fischer, who collected stamps. Hoffman, who never spoke to anyone. Weber, who had been here since the beginning. Weber's eyes were red. He had been crying. Brigade Führer Monka stood at the head of the table, tall, gray-haired, with a face like granite. Behind him stood 3 SS guards with MP40s, not holstered, not slung, held ready at chest level. The door closed behind me. The lock clicked. Monka surveyed us with eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. When he spoke, his voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Gentlemen, you have all been faithful servants of the Reich. You have transmitted messages, maintained communications, performed your duties with dedication. The Führer is aware of your service. He paused. The MP40s did not waver. However, you have also been exposed to classified information, strategic assessments, operational details, the Führer's private communications, information that cannot be allowed to fall into enemy hands. Weber made a sound in his throat, not quite a sob, not quite a gasp, just a sound that meant he understood where this was going. You will be reassigned, Monka continued, to an auxiliary communications post on the eastern perimeter. You will depart immediately. You are to take nothing with you. No papers, no personal effects, no information of any kind. This was a lie. I knew it was a lie. Everyone in this room knew it was a lie. There was no auxiliary communications post on the eastern perimeter. There was only the eastern perimeter itself, where Soviet soldiers were advancing through streets and buildings and shooting anything that moved. Reassignment meant execution. They were going to take us outside and shoot us like they shot Werner, like they had shot dozens of others who knew too much, or doubted too loudly, or showed fear at the wrong moment. Sir, Fischer said. His voice barely worked. Sir, may I retrieve my identification papers? They are at my station. No, you depart immediately. Sir, I have children, 3 children. My wife needs... The Reich will care for your family. Another lie. The Reich was burning. The Reich was 12 hours from Soviet artillery. The Reich was gasoline-soaked ventilation shafts waiting for a match. Schneider started crying, not trying to hide it, just standing there with tears running down his face and his shoulders shaking. One of the SS guards shifted his MP40, not pointing it, just shifting. A reminder that the guns were ready. I looked at those 3 submachine guns and did math in my head. 3 guards, 5 of us. The MP40 had a 32-round magazine and fired 500 rounds per minute. If we rushed them, they could kill all of us in under 3 seconds. But we were going to die anyway. The undelivered message in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Soviet artillery would hit in 12 hours. These SS guards did not know that. Monka did not know that. If I told them, would it matter? Would they let us go if they knew the bunker was about to be destroyed? No, they would kill us faster. Form up, Monka said. Single file. You will exit through the east tunnel. Follow instructions precisely. Any deviation will be considered an act of resistance. The east tunnel led to a secondary exit that opened into the ruins above. I had never been through it, but I had heard stories. Guards taking people up that tunnel, single shots echoing back down, bodies dumped in bomb craters. We formed a line. I was third. Schneider in front of me was still crying silently. Behind me, Hoffman was praying under his breath. Catholic prayers I half remembered from childhood. The SS guards took positions. One in front, one in the middle, one at the rear. The one at the rear kept his MP40 pointed at the ground, but his finger was on the trigger. We started walking. Through the door, into the corridor. The gasoline smell was stronger here. I could taste it on my tongue now, chemical and sharp. My eyes watered. Each breath felt like inhaling poison. We walked past my desk, past the teletype machine that was still chattering with incoming messages that no one would ever read, past the telephone that would ring unanswered, past the stack of folders containing classified reports that would burn or be captured or simply cease to matter. The corridor stretched ahead. 30 meters to the east tunnel entrance, 20 meters, 15. I could see the tunnel now. Rough, concrete walls, emergency lighting casting yellow shadows. No guards at the entrance because guards were not needed. Where would we run? The bunker was surrounded by Soviet soldiers above and SS killers below. 10 meters. Weber was first in line. I watched his back as he walked, straight, steady. He was not crying, not praying. Just walking toward his execution with his head up, because what else was there to do? 5 meters. My mind was racing through scenarios. All of them ended the same way. A bullet. A shallow grave. My mother receiving a letter with lies about honor and sacrifice. The general's voice echoed in my memory. You are very young. Hitler's voice. Lie well, Miller. Lie like your life depends on it. I took a breath, tasted gasoline, made a decision. Sir, my voice came out too loud, too sharp. Everyone stopped. The guard at the rear swung his MP40 toward me. Sir, urgent message just received. Soviet artillery coordinates. Monkey turned. His face showed nothing. Deliver it later. Sir, the message indicates bombardment of this sector within hours. I believe the Führer should... I said later. Sir, the ventilation system, the gasoline. If artillery hits while... Monka moved faster than I expected. 3 steps and he was in front of me. His hand closed around my throat, not squeezing, just holding, a reminder of how easy it would be. Private Miller, his voice was very quiet, very cold. Are you questioning orders? I could not speak with his hand on my throat, could not breathe properly, could only stare into his granite face and understand that I had just accelerated my own death. I thought not. He released me, stepped back, nodded to the guard at the rear. The guard raised his MP40. This was it. Not the East Tunnel, not a bomb crater. Right here in the corridor, my body would lie next to the teletype machine, and in 3 hours, Soviet artillery would bury everything, and no one would ever know what happened to Klaus Miller, communications specialist, age 22. Brigade Führer, a new voice, from behind us. We all turned. The old general stood in the corridor, the one who had given me a cigarette, the one with the dead eyes and clenched jaw. He looked at Monka with an expression I could not read. These men are needed for signal operations, the general said. New communications protocols from OKW. They cannot be reassigned until protocols are implemented. Monka's face remained granite. I have my orders. Your orders do not override OKW directives. Check with command authority if you doubt me. They stared at each other. 2 men who had spent years killing in the name of the Reich, now arguing over whether to kill 5 more. The MP40 remained pointed at my chest. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would explode. How long? Monka finally asked. 48 hours minimum. Very well. Return them to stations. But they do not leave the bunker. Post guards. No exceptions. The general nodded once. Monkey walked away without another word. The 3 SS guards lowered their weapons and followed him. We stood in the corridor. 5 men who had been seconds from death. Schneider was still crying. Fischer looked like he might vomit. Weber's face was gray. The general looked at me, at the message bulging in my pocket, at my face. He knew. He knew I had lied about the message timing. He knew I had tried to manipulate the situation. He knew, and he had saved me anyway. Return to your stations, he said quietly. Do your jobs. Keep your heads down. He turned to leave. I found my voice. Sir, thank you. He stopped, did not turn around. Don't thank me. I bought you 48 hours. After that, I don't know. And Miller? Yes, sir. Next time you lie to an SS officer, make sure you have a better lie. That was pathetic. He walked away. I stood there shaking, tasting gasoline, knowing I had just used up whatever luck I had left. We returned to our desks. No one spoke. What was there to say? We had 48 hours. The Soviets would arrive in 12. The math was simple and final. I sat at my teletype machine and pulled out the message about Soviet artillery, read it again, folded it again, put it back in my pocket. In 12 hours, this bunker would be rubble. Everyone inside would be dead. Hitler would be dead. Goebbels would be dead. Monka would be dead. The general would be dead. And I would be dead, unless I found a way out. I looked at the teletype machine, at the telephone, at the stacks of messages documenting the collapse of everything we had built. I had 48 hours and 12 hours and no idea which deadline would kill me first. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done taking orders. I was done delivering messages. I was done being a good soldier in a dying army. I was going to survive this, even if I had to become something worse than a liar to do it. The teletype started chattering. I let it run. Whatever it was saying, it did not matter anymore. The bunker smelled like gasoline and death and the end of the world, and I was 22 years old and determined not to die in this concrete tomb.